All right, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Marcia Castro. I'm the Endelot Professor of Demography at the Harvard T.H. Chin School of Public Health, and I direct the Brazil Studies program here at the David Rockefeller Center for Latin American Studies. We should have had here Steve Levitsky, the director of the David Rockefeller Center, to do the opening remarks, but Steve just had a bike accident, so I'm filling in for him, and hopefully everything will be okay. So, welcome everyone to the second Haddad Distinguished Lecture. We held our annual lecture last year with an economist, Arminio Fraga, who was also president of the Central Bank in Brazil. And this year, we're absolutely honored to have one of Brazil's leading scientists and advocate for science in Brazil, Professor Helena Nader, but I'm going to introduce her in a minute. Before that, I just want to take a moment to tell you a little bit about the man behind this distinguished lecture, Claudio Haddad. So Claudio has had a remarkable career spanning a wide range of fields, including academic, public service, and the private sector. An economist trained at the University of Chicago and Harvard Business School, Claudio taught business administration and then served in Brazil's central bank before moving into the private sector in the 1980s. He's founder and longtime chairman of the board of Insper, which has quickly become one of Brazil's top universities. Insper started off as a business school, but now has expanded into law, economics, engineering, and computer sciences. And I know Steve was going to challenge you, where is political science? So, you know, I'm sure it's coming. Claudio channeled his extraordinarily energy, talent, and creativity into Insper, insisting in making it an educational institution of the highest quality. And by all accounts, he has succeeded. Claudio has said he considers Insper his most important legacy. It is far from his only legacy, however. Claudio and his wife, Rosalie, are longtime supporters of Harvard. Among many other things, Claudio was absolutely instrumental in establishing the Brazil office of our program in São Paulo, helping to make it the single best Brazil Studies program in the United States. Did you hear that? I mean it. He's a general supporter of DRCLAS Brazil office, serving, among other things, as the chair of the Brazil Office Advisory Board. Claudio is also a recipient of the Harvard Business School Alumni Achievement Award, which recognizes alumni who have made significant contributions to their businesses and communities while maintaining the high standards and values. It is in this spirit of excellence that we have created the Haddad Lecture. The lecture is a very fitting way to honor Claudio's remarkable contributions to improving the quality of education both in Brazil and here at Harvard. The lecture will serve as one of Claudio's legacies to Harvard, providing a forum for serious, high-level conversations with prominent speakers from Brazil who take on issues of great relevance to the country. Thank you, Claudio, for your generosity and for really pushing us to make the Brazil Studies program a brilliant program with the highest standards. So thank you very much for everything you do for us. So now I want to take a minute to introduce our speaker. Helena Nader is Professor Emeritus at the Medical School of the Federal University of São Paulo, Unifesp, and her research area is molecular and cell biology. She has published extensively. I'm not going to tell you about this. She has been an incredible mentor, hundreds of students, postdocs, fellows, that now hold teaching positions both in Brazil and abroad. But in addition to her remarkable contributions to science, Helena has been committed to promoting gender and racial equity and has contributed to initiatives aimed at reducing the gap in scientific development between regions in Brazil and improving the high level of high school education nationwide. Thanks to her efforts, Unifesp was the first federal university in Brazil to adopt affirmative action. She has been a role model for many for many women in Brazilian universities, helping to promote the empowerment of women and breaking down barriers in society. Since May 2022, Helena has served as president of the Brazilian Academy of Sciences, the first woman to become president of the Academy in 106 years. At Unifesp, she was also the first woman to become Dean of Undergraduate Studies and Dean of Graduate Studies and Research. In her inaugural address to the Academy, she emphasized her commitment to gender, racial, and ethnic equity in science and the importance of having science and education as long-term policies. I want to quote, it's not from the inauguration, but it's something else Helena has said. An individual who cannot think scientifically is also unable to listen to information and judge whether or not it's real. This is so needed and reflects so much of what we see in society now. Referring to the United Nations 2030 Agenda, Helena emphasized the importance of harmonizing social, economic, and environmental aspects, which are interrelated and crucial for the well-being of individuals and societies. Helena has been a member of the Brazilian Society for the Advancement of Science since 1969 and served as president of the society from 2011 to 2017. She's a champion of equality, diversity, and inclusion in science. As you all know, this is critically important despite the current attacks on those efforts. As I like to say, once a rebel, always a rebel, and Helena took part in the resistance against the military dictatorship in Brazil, always fighting for science. So if you know me, you now understand why, for me, she's a Jedi. This year, when Brazil hosts the G20, Helena chaired the Science 20, which is when all the presidents of Academy of Sciences of all the G20 countries come together, and they formed the National Science Academies of the G20 countries. And this effort produced a superb document that was approved, that will be presented in November when we have the big meeting with all the presidents and prime ministers in Rio de Janeiro in Brazil. Helena has received many national and international awards and honors. I'm not going to list them all, but I'll tell you just a couple. She received the degree of Commander and the Grand Cross of the National Order of Scientific Merit from the Brazilian government. And in 2020, she received the most prestigious award any scientist in Brazil can receive. It's the Admiral Álvaro Alberto Award, given annually by the National Council for Scientific and Technological Development, the Ministry of Science and Technology, and the Conrado Vessel Foundation. This award, in particular, recognizes Brazilian researchers for their work in advancing the progress of science and promoting the transfer of knowledge from academia to the productive sector. I could go on and on and on, but I think you got an idea of how brilliant Helena is and how important she is to science and how lucky we are to have her here with us today. On a personal note, I would like to say that getting to know you has been a blessing, and receiving my certificate of election to the Brazilian Academy of Sciences from your hands, signed by you, is both an honor, but also comes with a great responsibility, and I'm taking this very serious. So, friends of DRCLAS, ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Helena Nader.
Well, I'm a little bit scared now because she said so many beautiful things about me. I didn't know that. Thank you so much, Marcia. For me, it's an honor to be here today. And how can I start? Move here, right? Yeah. Okay. So I want to thank Dr. Claudio Haddad for the initiative of this chair. I really thank you. It's very important, and for me it's an honor. It's going to really, I hope I'm not going to disappoint you. And I was thinking, what can I say about prioritizing strategic investments in science, technology, and innovation for Brazil's sustainable future. We are in the David Rockefeller Center for Latin American Studies. So what can I say that's going to be a novelty? Very little. So I decided that I was going to bring not the view of the Brazilian Academy of Science, but my view of science in Brazil. So I'll go very quickly through a historical introduction on Brazil's education and science ecosystem, some numbers, some aspects of education, science, innovation, investments, and finally, examples and opportunities for STI and sustainable future, and what, in my view, needs to be done. So briefly, I know I'm going back to the discovery of Brazil, and this is something that I want to share with you. Lots of our problems up today is because we still think and believe that Europe found us. We were there. I'm an immigrant. My father is the first generation Brazil, Lebanon too, and my mother is the first generation coming from Florence. So I'm a Brazilian, but an immigrant. But there were indigenous population over there. And we, up to now, do not acknowledge that. And if we don't do that, we're going to always be looking at the north and not looking inside. So we need to acknowledge that. So we are discovered. And I want to recall that if it wasn't for Napoleon that decided to invade Portugal in 1808, I don't know where we would be, because we were not entitled to have printing in Brazil. We didn't have colleges, universities, totally different than the Spanish Latin American countries, where the first universities started in the 1500s, both in Mexico and Peru. So it's totally different. We cannot compare. We are not the best, not even the worst, but we are different. And we need to acknowledge that. So in 1820, and when Dom João VI came to Brazil, he took all the royal family, and they really, indeed, moved to Brazil. They took all the library, all the arts they used to have. And finally, we start having some education. And in 1822, we got independence and became a monarchy. In 1889, my opinion, the first coup of state, because it was the general, the Marechal Deodoro, who proclaimed the Republic, was good friends with the Emperor, Pedro II. And then all of a sudden he declares we are a republican. And several things went on. And again, a very sad past for our country, 64 to 85, another tragedy, a strong military coup that was in our country for several years. And finally, from 1985 to 1990, we had, it was a time of 5 years period for presidents, and we had the first civilian president in several years. But this was not a direct vote, was by an electoral college. And in 1999, up to now, we have the direct vote and for president, deputies, senators, and so on. So our democracy is very young. And I want to bring to you some aspects of the Constitution, because several our Constitution started in 1988. It's a little bit over some. But what I want to say is, when it was promulgated in the Congress, and this has been 1988, about 31 years, 30-something years, it has received 133 amendments. But what's important is that several international agreements that Brazil signed on human rights and were voted by the Congress requiring and the quorum of an amendment are also included in the Constitution. And let's look now at this, when the science starts in Brazil. As I mentioned, when Dom João starts in Brazil, we have the Botanical Garden, National Museum, the one that was on fire a few years ago. It's from the time of Dom João VI. And then we start having, for instance, in the north part of Brazil, if someone of you go to Belém do Pará, you need to visit the Gaudí Museum. It's a fantastic place to be. And that is from the late 1800s. And the first agricultural college it was in Bahia, and that, as far as I understood, was the first one in Americas. Maybe that's why the agriculture in Brazil is so strong. It started at late 18th and 19th century. And then, if we move the first universities, it dates to 1920. It's supposed to be the Federal University of Rio de Janeiro, but indeed, it's not the first university, because that was an arrangement. It's not a university as we know a university. The first university is University of São Paulo, really as a university in the way we believe nowadays. And that was in 1934. Then we have in the 50s, 1951, January, the creation of CNPq, the first funding agents. In July, the same year, of CAPES, several Brazilian studies students that are here today are financed both by CNPq and CAPES. And in the early 70s, the first graduate programs. 1985, the Ministry of Science, Technology, and Innovation, that changed, became a secretary. It's always like that. But finally, now we have Ministry of Science, Technology, and Innovation back into business. And the restructure of the federal system of higher education that start to increase a lot in the first government of President Lula. And also the creation, the establishment of several federal institutes all around the country. So this is the ecosystem that we have in terms of education. In numbers, I want to call your attention that we have 26 states, 1 federal district, 1 territory, a population of around 213 million people, with a 51% female and a very slow decline in population growth. Every time I prepare these slides, I get surprised by how much is declining. It's supposed to be 0.5 now. And depending on the one that's grading the economics, we are 9th, 8th, or 10th. And this is something that we need to take into account. Why do we need science? Why do we need education? That's the question everyone should always ask. Why? And this number is something that I don't like it. I don't like it at all. I would like Brazil to be one, which means that when I take into consideration life expectancy, income, education, among other things, I'm going to get a rate of 1, which means I'm the best. We are getting a rate of 0.76. And we are in the 80-something position, because it's all configured here in the slides, but among 193 countries. So we have a long way to go. We really need to acknowledge that. This I'm not going to discuss in here, mainly having my dear friend Marcia, but that's something that really needs to be taken into consideration. We have a very short window, a small window in terms of investing in the youth, because we are going to become old, and this old population is going to need health care, is going to need help to survive. It's going to be someone that needs to be acquainted in normal language. And don't forget that AI is really going to be present. And if we don't teach them how they're going to survive in the future. Education. I'm going to bring very quickly a few numbers. Brazil is in red. The circle means people without upper, not higher education, high school, lower than achieving high school. And the X is the ones that have high school education completed. It's about the same. And the losango, the ones that have tertiary education. You see that that is around 15%. Also this, now we are going to look people with age 25 to 34, the circle, and 55 to 64, the losango, which means we are improving. This is a good sign. We are getting more young generation to tertiary education. But this is something that really, and this data is from OECD. It's a report that's open in the media. It's not, as Marcia said, I work with glycobiology. Heparin is one of the compounds that I work a lot. If anybody needs an anticoagulant, I'm around here to help you understand how it works. But this is something that's not fair. Look, the dark blue are young generation, 18 to 24, that it's around 35% does not study and does not work. The light blue is the one that's not in the education, but it's employed. The yellow, kind of yellow color, I don't know what color is that, it changes, is in education and unemployed or inactive, and the orange one is both education and employed. That's something that we need to take into consideration. And in here, it just came out in the last INEP results, 22.5 million people, 18 to 24. And if you look at the numbers, 43% have completed high school. 21% have not. 20% attends higher education. And then it goes the other numbers. So even though we are improving, we're still far away from people told me, you're not going to be there to do criticism. It's not to do criticism. It's to be aware of the points that we all together need to change. Because what's going on in Latin America, it's not only in Brazil, it's Latin America. The same thing is going on in all the countries. Only that now we have a democracy. Several countries don't have a democracy anymore. So that's why here it's very important, the Latin American Center, to be aware indeed of all this data. And here's something that really preoccupies me a lot. Because in Brazil, what we call public education, you don't pay for that. It's free of charge. And that represents about 12.5%. The rest you are paying. And among the ones that you pay, you have Insper, and I'm really glad that I have a grandson that studies over there, really happy with the education he is getting there. But Insper is not the private aspect that preoccupies me, that worries me. Because Insper, the PUCs, they are dedicated, even though they are considered private. They are a different way of teaching. FGV is the same. But that's not the majority. And if we look at the distribution, it's 2.3% municipal, 5% state, and only around 5% federal. And if you look, I apologize for everything is not formatted anymore. So it's always like that. You know, people with artificial intelligence should help me. I don't know why. When you send by email, everything changes. So what I'm really concerned is that it used to be that we used to have more students in evening class. Now we have more students in what we call ensino à distância, e-learning. And that's something that we need to be aware. E-learning is important, very important, but you need to have the e-learning with presential points. And the majority don't have that anymore. Science. The same way that we are looking at the things that we need to solve, it's fantastic. I don't understand Brazil. I'm trying to understand. Because we still need to change the undergraduate. We need to change high school, but we did a fantastic job in terms of graduate programs. So if you look at this map in 1998, everything that's gray means we didn't have any program, any graduate program. This is 2022. Everywhere we have graduate programs. And if you pay attention to Bahia, it's in blue in 1998, and now it's red in 2022, which means the number of graduate programs have increased. And for the ones, because the papers in Brazil always Folha, Estadão, and I read all of them. I love them, but I criticize them too, because they could do the criticism, but they also should point to the good sides, that the good points that are happening. And for instance, it used to be that we didn't have any excellent programs of excellence in the north. Now we have programs of excellence in the north, in the southeast, everywhere. Of course, the southeast predominates, but also you have the largest population over there. So we are doing a fantastic job in that. But here is something that is worrying everybody. We have the curve means published papers. We are going to get back to that. And if you look at the green is the number of doctorates that were received their degree. In yellow, the masters, and in brownish color, the professional masters, okay? And you see that there is a decrease and a decrease in the publications. And this, again, oh, it changed everything. But if you look in here, you see this is the decrease, 21 and 22, sorry, and 23. And in all areas. And what caught my attention is, of course, health science were the largest number of publications, is the one that declined the most. And if we go, this is the year of between 21 and 22. You could say, well, everybody has declined. No, several countries increased. And this is considering all in countries that publish at least 10,000 papers. And here's Brazil. It was all over the media. At that time, Brazil together with Ukraine. We all have 7.3% decrease in number of publications. But if you pay attention, the U.S. house is there. We need to understand what is going on. We really need to understand this data. And this is now this year, 22 and 23. We are not the worst. We are number 3 in the ones that declined the most, okay? But again, the U.S. is there. So we need to understand what is going on. And several countries are still increasing publications. Could be predatory journals, could be several explanations. But someone, that's not going to be me because I don't know how to analyze this data, have to pay some attention to that. And in here is the citation. This is a report that just came out, Clarivates. And if you look, the citation, the world citation is 1. We have around 0.8. But I want to show this in here. Here's Brazil. The size of the bubble means how many of the publications are in the top 1% cited. And Brazil is not doing bad. Not a single newspaper wrote about this. They just wrote about the average citation. And here is breaking in terms of different areas. So you have agricultural science, that's the average is 0.7 around, and then you have health science, 1.05, which means is above the world citation. And if you look at the percentage of papers in the top 10%, Brazil is doing good. So I'm a critic. I did criticize, but I want to show you where. And in here is collaborations. Some of you asked me the other day, with whom do we collaborate? It varies a lot depending on the area. So all partners is in green. And if you look at USA, we do not collaborate as much in earth and exact science. I don't know why. We need to understand that too. And we do collaborate a lot with continental China in that area. What's going on? And we do collaborate in biological science, health science. So I think this report is something to pay attention. Innovation. I was anxious. I got so depressed that I didn't change the graph because The new Global Innovation Index was just issued last Friday, I think. Yes, last Friday, September 26, I think. And Brazil, I was hoping that Brazil would raise. And we got a score of 50, which means we are the best ones in Latin America and the Caribbean, but we remain around the same position. We didn't change besides all the efforts. And here is another thing that I want to share with you. As people like to look at how many papers do we publish in collaboration with industry. And if you look at USA, you have something like around 4% of papers in collaboration with industry. And in Brazil is about 1.5. It's increasing, but it's still far from what the country needs. And investments. Well, we're getting better, but not in the way that we need. I took this data, I checked each one of the countries individually using OCDE, and if you look at the countries, Brazil, China, you would see that in 2000, Brazil was investing more than China. Look at the difference now. China, 2021, is investing 2.4 of their GDP, which is much higher than ours, and Brazil is still 1.2. And if you go and move around, you'll see Israel and other countries, okay? So if you don't invest, you don't have return. And unfortunately, and this is it's an interesting paper that I suggest every student here should read it, because it was a request from the Congress of the United States. They want to understand why China was going so good in science. And that was during, I think, Trump's administration yet. I don't recall the date now. And they found out that they were investing much more money. So if you look at FY22, is an extra that was given by the congressman. And unfortunately, in Brazil, it happened just the opposite. Because we have the framework for fiscal, now the tax framework, the equilibrium that needs to be reached. And the senators voted for taking everything that was science, technology, and innovation from all different ministries wouldn't be in the arcabouço fiscal, this framework. But then went back to the deputies and they decided, no, everybody is the same. So they are not seeing that an investment takes time and it's important to happen. Here is what all of you have heard, the Brazilian ones. That's I call tábua de salvação. Everything now is going to be supported by FNDCT, which is the National Fund for Scientific and Technological Development. It's a fantastic fund. It's increasing. It's getting better every year, but that's not going to support what the country needs. We need to have more investments. And some opportunities. Don't forget, we need to remember all the time that all 193 countries signed an agreement on the 17 SDGs and leave no one behind. This is a paper also that I recommend everyone to read by Sachs and an economist, Mariana Mazzucato. It's very important because it looks like sometimes economists don't pay attention. No, she's talking very loudly about the importance of having investments in science and to be aware of this. And this I'm going to skip. I'll leave for the ones that wanted. So Brazil has natural resources, 12% of the planet fresh water, vast energy potential. We are agriculture leader, and we have biodiversity, all of that. And I'm going to bring to you people some new examples because I'm tired of Petrobras, I'm tired of Embraer. They are good, but there are others. And we need to acknowledge them and say it's important to invest. Look, you invested and something is coming up. So this is about Embrapi. That's a new model of financing, and they are working in different areas, and they work. One part is the government, Embrapi. The other is the university or the technological institution, and the other is the industry. And they together are financed, this 3.2 billion reais in this type of projects. And they have a deposit already, and Embrapi has started about 10 years ago. It's very, very new. So it's a way of doing things with industry and the universities. And it's all over Brazil. The region of Brazil. This is another one that I want to show you, WEG. It's a company that was created by WEG, three friends in Santa Catarina, and they are in 40 countries, and they have plants in 17 countries, and they are the world manufacturer in electric equipment. And WEG, you all know that we have until the next one is finished, the synchrotron line that we have in Brazil is the top line in the world nowadays. And WEG was the company that was inside CNP and did the magnets that were important for, and now is doing for other synchrotrons that are being built in the world. And here it's not showing, but they have a strong portfolio, and in here I would have a statement saying how much they are getting in billions of reais for the money they invested in the last 5 years. Nobody remembers of WEG. That's why I decided to bring another one. We all love the cosmetics, and Natura is one that bought several companies everywhere, but that's another important point that I want to bring. Is their type of business model that's all in compliance with sustainability practice. And they are a leader globally. Uranium reserves. Brazil has is number 8 among the 10th. And we always use this nuclear energy for energy, right? The potential is not for war. And Brazil decided to invest in that. And we had problems in trying to concentrate the uranium, and we couldn't buy outside because some countries forbid us to by the fibers, the nanostructure that we needed. So we develop, and we have now a concentration that's in this columns in here. And we are using that for, we all started the multi-purpose reactor, and we are investing a lot in small modular reactors. Problems in here. There is no definition yet by the Atomic Energy Command, the general one that's in Austria, saying what is going to be the prototype? How are we going to adopt? And this would be a solution for energy in the Amazon, because we could have that very easily transported, and you have the energy that's going to be necessary. In agriculture, you may not believe, but I was a small child several years ago, and I remember that Brazil imported food. We didn't have the production that we have now. We didn't have cheese. We didn't have enough milk. All of this would come from abroad. And in the 60s, Brazil decided to invest, and we transformed, and we became leaders in tropical agriculture through science. And that's she was vice president of the Brazilian Academy of Science, Joana Doberheim. In November would be her 100th anniversary. And she was the one who did the job of understanding how can I grab the nitrogen that's important to the growth of the plant. And now we have this no tillage, integrated crop livestock forest system, we do that, and biological nitrogen fixation. And this is something that's biological nitrogen fixation for biofertilizers. And this is something that I want to bring to you, some in tons of CO2. Because if you use biofertilizers, you decrease the amount of CO2. And Brazil is doing that. So finally, just a few slides to finish. What needs to be done? Unique opportunities, natural resource and green technologies. We are doing that. But we need more to be done. In terms of energy, there is a lot of companies investing. Not only Petrobras, but companies from abroad are investing a lot into research into green hydrogen and other colors of hydrogen. So we are doing a lot of that. And we need to really get certified sustainable agricultural practice, okay, to guarantee the biodiversity and the biotech innovations. We need to have partners. It's important to have partners. Nowadays, nobody does anything only by himself. And we need to have economic growth through innovation. So we need investments in science, technology, and innovation. We need to diversify. It's not possible to go on mining everywhere in the country. Illegal mining, because the legal mining does everything by the book. but the illegal mining is going on. And illegal is going on because there is a market, and a global market. The same is true for all Amazon. It's not only Brazil. The gold mining in the Amazon is for all 8 countries in the Amazon. The same problems of Brazil are going on in the other countries. So we need to have a fair discussion on how to stop that. We need, indeed, Brazil needs to be the leader in addressing environmental challenges. We have to have a stronger voice, in my opinion, because it's really important. And the social impact. Why we are doing all of this? For the fun of it, or because there is a population that can get something from that? We can't forget that. Increase funding. We need to have policy alignment. And we cannot forget education and capacity building. And finally, my last slide is about the S20. I was the Sherpa for the S20. The G20 comprised 19 countries and 2 unions: Argentina, Australia, Brazil, Canada, China, France, Germany, India, Indonesia, Italy, Japan, Mexico, Russia, Saudi Arabia, South Africa, South Korea, Turkey, United Kingdom, United States, and now African Union and European Union. And the motto for our meeting was Science for Global Transformation. And we had 5 task forces that were artificial intelligence with the discussion on ethics, social impact, regulation, and knowledge sharing. Bioeconomy, shaping the world towards a sustainable planet. Energy transition process, renewable energies, but we need to take into consideration the social impacts, because we always think that eolic does not affect, it does affect the environment. If you do not pay into consideration the people that are living nearby. So we need to take that into consideration. And we need to have studies, because offshore eolic needs to check the impact that's going to happen in the currents and the oceans. We need to have lots of science into that. Health challenge, quality, equity, access, preparedness for epidemics, and climate change. And finally, social justice, both promoting inclusion, ending poverty, and reducing inequalities. The communique that we had was signed by the S20, except for one country that didn't agree with the energy process, a sentence. We even asked them if they would consider signing and stating that except for that sentence, but they didn't agree, and that was Saudi Arabia. But for the first time, we had a communique that was written by all the academies. Brazil didn't impose. I almost got nuts because I was centralizing all the discussions, and we sent a draft to the academies. They came back with their considerations, and all together during 2 days in Rio, we wrote down the final version that was then taken, because not all presidents were present, taken back to the board of directors of all the academies, and it was finally signed. And I'm really glad, because the G20 countries already accepted everything that we wrote in terms of bioeconomy, with the same wording and the same considerations. So I want to thank you, the David Rockefeller Center for Latin American Studies. I hope, Claudio, I didn't disappoint you. And I want to thank my Brazilian Academy of Science and my alma mater, Escola Paulista de Medicina, who had the courage of deciding 25 years ago, we decided that we need to move into different areas, and we were already a university dedicated to the health aspects, health science, but we became a university now with all areas. So to Unifesp, but especially to my alma mater, Escola Paulista de Medicina, who really, I was a student over there. I had the privilege of being a professor over there, and I had the privilege of tutoring so many fantastic students that came from different countries and from different parts of Brazil. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Helena. I love the fact that you started painting the picture, but then you highlighted some positive things and some amazing contributions that Brazil has made that sometimes get neglected. Whenever I talk about malaria to an audience, I always emphasize that it was a Brazilian who first made the connection between the mosquito biting inside the house, which is the basis of indoor residual spraying and bed nets. Yeah. And it was a Brazilian that did this, Carlos Chagas. So yeah. I think it's important to highlight the amazing contribution that Brazil has. We have some time for questions. I knew we were going to be the first one. I knew that. So I'm just going to ask you to raise your hand and be brief. Remember, you've heard me saying this before. A question is short and ends with a question mark. So.
Helena, first, I'd like to thank you for your amazing presentation. It's an honor to receive you here. This year was very important for science and technology in Brazil. We had the national conference. We were there together. And, well, the main outcome of this conference is the strategic plan for the next 10 years of science and technology in Brazil. And my question is, I know you are very involved with this as well. And my question is, how do you decide the fields that are going to be invested for these 10 years? I know, like, probably agriculture is going to be one of them. Probably we're going to surf on the hype as well of AI. But overall, like, are we looking for practical outcomes of the research? Like, are we looking for basic science as well?
Yeah, it's a good question. Of course, without basic science, you won't have any innovation, neither any technological news. So basic science is the fundamental one. But the big, and this will, I believe, is going to go on, okay? But if you think on investments for technology and innovation, Brazil will need to decide. And it's not going to be one person that's going to decide. In Brazil, we have what's called the CCT, that's the National Council of Science and Technology. All ministers are in this council, and the president is the one that presides the council. And when in his absence, it's the Minister of Science, Technology, and Innovation. So the fifth conference will bring the inputs, the final inputs, and this council is going to work and give suggestions upon what is in there. But as I pointed out, I I can visualize that nuclear energy is going to be an important issue. And nuclear energy is going to be into that. Agriculture, for sure. Energy transition, because if you can't rely nowadays with the climate change on hydrological power only, because sometimes you don't have enough water. And this is happening, and sometimes you have too much. Look at what happened in Rio Grande do Sul and what is going on in the Amazon. The Solimões is totally dry. And that's something that we need. How do you get electricity to these people? How do you get them to communicate? So I think something related to the Amazon as well as to the ocean is going to come. Brazil, because we always think about the biodiversity of the Amazon. It's fantastic, but the Cerrados also. Biodiversity is everywhere, and Brazil does not know its coast. And the ocean has a strong, and also you notice that there are several companies trying to get minerals from the ocean. Not only sodium chloride, but manganese, several others. So we need to study, see what are our reserves and the biodiversity of these areas. But it's not going to be one person that's going to decide. I can guarantee you.
Eduardo.
Professor Helena, Marcia, Claudio, thank you for this wonderful opportunity. This is my last Haddad lecture because I'm a senior here at the college. I'm getting very nostalgic. And being able to see Marcia and Helena on the same table is so inspiring. My question is from a story. I know you mentioned that we shouldn't talk about Embraer, but it's a story that comes from the founder of Embraer, Osiris Silva. He was in Roda Viva, and Osiris mentioned the story of talking with the committee of the Nobel Prize and asking them why we don't have Nobel Prize winners, which I disagree. We do have Nobel Prize winners.
Several.
From Chico Chagas, that we should consider a Nobel Prize winner, to Isabella Teixeira in the IPCC. But Osiris mentioned the story that there's an international perception that we don't value scientists as much as some other countries. And the exact expression he uses is very strong, that we destroy our heroes, our science heroes. And my question to you is, thinking about the future, what could we put in place in order to reverse that and make scientists, from the public school teachers to university scientists, because I consider all of them scientists, to be valued as they should be, and then hopefully with many more Nobel Prize winners?
Well, I totally agree with you. We have several. I'm going to mention just a few because I think it's important. Carlos Chagas, okay? There is no Nobel winner, no scientist in the world up to now that did what Chagas did. He described the whole disease, from the mosquito to the human being. But I disagree with Osiris. It's not that Brazil doesn't praise their scientists. Is Brazil doesn't have anybody that goes, because you know how a Nobel is given, right? Everybody knows. So if you don't have a good advocate, you're lost. And if you look at the number of women scientists in the world and how many women got the Nobel Prize, and how many women were taking away from the paper, it's amazing. So I don't think that's a way to value. It's important. We would love to have, but I'm going to give you another example. Lattice. How come he didn't get the number? He's in the paper, sorry. So we need to, it's important to have, but that doesn't mean that we are less involved in science. That's something but I would say that what we are doing now, people are starting to go, the scientists, the professors, the students, to schools, because you know the conditions of several of our, not only public schools, several schools that the parents are paying a lot, thinking they are getting a really good education. They are not doing well in the several exams that we have. So advocacy is something that's very important. And trying to translate science into simple words. Trying to show to society the importance of science. Here in the States, I remember when I was living in Lake Placid, I stayed there for a year together with my husband, the two of us. It's a small town, it's around 3,000 people, it's less than that. And we stayed for a year in Alton Jones Health Science Center. And I remember a deputy that wanted to have that in each lab, whenever you diluted something from the original bottle, you have to reproduce all the information that was in the original bottle. All the way, because Lake Placid is upstate New York, almost in Canada. We got a meeting, and everybody wrote, each one of them, to their deputies, saying, if you do this, you're not going to have my vote anymore. The day after, that thing was taken out. So we need to dialogue, because in Brazil, people forget that and we are going to have an election now for mayors all over the country, but also we're going to elect the council, vereadores as we call, and to both vereadores, deputies, state deputies, and federal deputies. Whenever they are elected, you are giving them a statement saying that you entitle them to speak on your behalf. And nobody goes back to the ones that were elected. They're not there because they are nice people or ugly people, whatever. They're there because someone voted. And we need to be more aware of the vote that we give. And that means we need education. And education at a very initial level. That's something that, unfortunately, I have a hard time remembering that a few years ago, some young generation were asking for dictatorship in our country, because they didn't know what it was to be in a dictatorship. I remember that quite well. I remember friends that I lost and professors that I lost. So when something like that happens, not with the parents, but the young generation asking for that, you visualize that you did a mistake. And that's why now, every year, we celebrate democracy. We celebrate our Constitution to make sure that the young generation pays attention to that.
Can I add one thing to this?
Yeah.
We should also never forget memory. And this year, we skip the memory of the coup in March. To me, that's a big mistake.
Yes, you're right.
Anyway, here.
Thank you so much for this amazing class, Professor Helena. I would love to hear more about the connection between the decline of published papers and the stagnation of scientific investment in Brazil. This is especially relevant as I reflect on our unique potential, not only in terms of natural resource, but also in the type of knowledge being developed in our universities, despite, obviously, our limited budget. So, yeah, I am a professor in a new federal university in the northeast of Brazil, so that's why I'm just...
Where?
Unilab.
I know it.
Yeah. Thank you so much. It was amazing.
Okay, thank you so much for your question. And I would say that the correlation is not a direct correlation with the decrease in funding, because we had a terrible decrease in funding during the last, you know,
The last.
the last. And, but it's not only that. There's something more. And I think what worries me more is not the decline in the number of publications, is the decline of people entering graduate programs. That really concerns me, because without graduate program, there's going to be a stronger decrease. And for that, there are several analyses that could be performed. One is the amount of money for a fellowship. It's too low. It's too low. You cannot, you need to have your family support to go into graduate programs. And that's something that's going to affect, if we want to change the color of skin, because it's not race. We just published, and I think it's important if you look at that, the Brazilian Academy of Science has just issued a book, and we're going to have it also in Spanish and in English, about evolution. And Sergio Pena, who is a fantastic geneticist, he gives all the rationale that why race doesn't exist. And it doesn't exist at all. It's proved genetically. If you'll go into the human genome, you'll find out that. But the point is, we got affirmative actions all over Brazil for undergraduate programs. And we would expect those people to go into graduate. They are not coming because they need to pay and be support for their families. Or either we look that with good care, or we are going to not have the number of graduate students that the country needs. I didn't bring here, but remember there was a Minister of Education that said, why do we need more doctors? And well, there is a book I can send to you guys the information. 2022, the number of PhDs in the state was around 70,000 people a year. And in Brazil was 20,000. In Germany, 35,000. So if a country like the size of Germany needs more doctors, imagine us that are still trying to do a big step. So there is a problem with funding, but there is something else besides the funding. And yesterday, I was glad to hear that I received a note from the students, the Union of Graduate Students, stating that they need a correction in the amount of money for each fellowship, because it's very important. It's investment, but the point is, our politicians don't see education and science as investment. They see it as gastos, how do you
Expense,
say?
an expense.
Expenses. So thank you for your question.
It's working. Thank you, Professor Helena, for the amazing talk and the conversation too. You are from Federal University of São Paulo, and recently it has approved affirmative action for transgender people. It's like in all the undergraduate and graduate programs. And my question is, you already started talking about affirmative actions, and how important do you think they are, for increasing the quality of research in Brazil, and how you think these fundings can also use this diversity criteria to help Black researchers, transgender researchers to do this kind of work too?
Well, I think we need to include everyone, all genders, okay, and all tones of skin, because diversity is what makes research go on. If you exclude, you won't have the different ways of looking at something that you need sometimes to solve a problem. How do you do that? I don't think that with a federal law you're going to have that. I think each university has to discuss, and our university has that. My program, not mine, I don't take it home, but I was the coordinator of the graduate program of molecular biology, which is one of the top programs in the country. We had transgenders several years ago, going on several. We even, in a time when we didn't have the changing name, the student came, one of them came to us and he said, I want to be called like this. I said, okay, you will. But at the end, the paper needs to have your original name. So, and that was normal and within the class. But nowadays in Brazil, you are either for or you are either against. There is no in middle. We need to check the balance. We need to introduce more and more equity, but I don't think forcing through a federal law is going to happen. Just look at what happened into politics. It decreased the number of women and other genders in politics, which is crazy. So we need to really have an open discussion among us that believe that's important. Because the ones that don't believe, you're not going to convince them. I'm getting too old to believe that I can change. When I was young, I thought I could change the world. Now I strongly believe that's going to be important if I can change my surroundings, if I dedicate to that. I don't know if that's my personal view, okay? Because I don't have a view
in our academy, for instance, we have very few black people. And we have one indigenous, that's Davi Copenaua. He's a member of the Brazilian Academy of Science, correspondent member. And we are trying our best. I don't know why. And if you look at Brazil, at least 50% are mesclated. Don't you agree with me? But I think for gender, we are doing much better than we used to do 10 years ago. I think we accomplished, and we need to celebrate that and ask for more and know how to get to that.
Thank you, Professor Helena, for your presentation. My name is Giovanna, and I'm currently doing some research at MIT, and we're talking about innovation ecosystems, especially in the Global South. And I wanted to get your insights in what are the key stakeholders to foster innovation, and especially I've been looking into universities, public sector, private sector, but how can we foster this connection between them in a sustainable way?
One way is through Embrapi. Embrapi is fostering that. Embrapi was planned similar to, they have something similar in Germany, where you have the institutes and then you have the private sector and they work together. So that's something. BNDES is also doing that now. Now it has even another S in the BNDES, Desenvolvimento Social e Sustentável, right? So that's something. And I would say depends on the area of innovation you were talking about. In some areas, Brazil is doing a lot of innovation. In others, very little. And for instance, in terms of the pharmaceutical industries, that's why the Ministry of Health set up a new program that's going to be dedicated to equipments and also inputs for health. And I hope it works, because the pharma that we have over there from abroad, they do zero. When I say zero, is zero. Zero R&D. Okay? So, and we are not going to, we should have imposed several years ago. Now it's too late. But we now have all the conditions to improve that together with, for instance, Fiocruz, Butantan. I'm just talking about two that know how to produce, and that together with what would be the power of buying. I don't know how you say that in English, but poder de compra, okay? The state can use that and should use that for SUS. So we should develop, and I hope we do, and I hope I'll be alive to see all this going on, because that's very important, because it's not only is going to serve Brazil, it's going to serve the Global South. Don't forget, the Global South was all by themselves during pandemics. They didn't have the vaccines. They wanted, but they didn't have it. So we need to diversify. Production has to be in several places. And in Brazil, I can tell you, I have some good friends in the pharmaceutical industry that develop some monoclonal antibodies type of pharmaceutical. And what happened? They had to sell to the international company because the price that they need to sell in Brazil was much lower than the company. But the company then lowered in such a way that they couldn't go on producing that monoclonal antibody. That's dumping, but it happens. That's why I think Minister Nizia did a fantastic job in terms of having this program that's going to be also for equipments. We have an equipment that was developed during pandemics that you can do, it's not CT, but can get the same, you know that much better than me. He's the one that should be answering this. But you can do by the bed with a simple machine and you can get fantastic data. And that was developed in Brazil. So now they're going to produce that. They are producing already, but they need more money to be invested. So I think we're going to get there. Really, I believe and I hope. And I want to say this, even the ones that are not going to go back to Brazil, you can still collaborate with the country. And that's very important because you can be here and you can do partnership with the people that are in our country. And that's going to be very important too. It's not that you have to go back. Would be good if you would go back, but if you can't, and each one has a private life, you can still do lots of things to your country. Don't forget that originally you are Brazilians, just that.
Okay, last question.
Thank you so much. Doutora Helena, Doutora Márcia, muito obrigado. Thank you so much for this. It's such an honor and a privilege to get to meet you. It's another item in my bucket list at DRCLAS. It helps me check off, so thank you very much. My question to you, yesterday and today you spoke a lot about an issue with the communication of science and how important that is to kind of bridge the gap of the people with the pens in Congress and the people with the pipettes in universities. And in the United States, it's such an issue for science policy in general that many people in Congress, for example, most people are not trained at all in any type of scientific understanding. My question to you is if you think that in Brazil, it's important for the strategy of how to bridge that gap for us to get scientists to go up for Congress and go up for elections and start taking those places and making those changes as people with experience directly in the production of science, or if you think that that's not necessarily something that should be center stage.
Well, that depends on each person. For instance, when I finish my appointment, and let me, so that you can understand, both SBPC, Sociedade Brasileira para o Progresso da Ciência, and the Brazilian Academy are pro bono. You don't get any salary. So that's why my alma mater was able to pay my salary when I was doing other things, okay? So it's all pro bono. But regarding your question, I think it's most relevant that I got, oh, my goodness, I lost my track of, o que foi que ele perguntou agora? I lost myself.
Se os cientistas têm que se
Yeah,
candidatar para
no,
política.
yeah, no, because I was going to say this. People decide, you are so good that you need to run for deputy. And I said, that will never happen. But I think what we should have is what you have here in the States. Most of you maybe do not know. AAAS has at least 1,000 postdocs, and the National Academy of Science also working and giving advice on different ministries, secretaries, okay? That's something that we need to have in Brazil. The deputies that I have a strong dialogue, they have this. They have not the number that you have here, but they pay attention and they know they need advice. So that's something that instead of hiring your friend, you hire to be your advisor, the ones that knows better in different aspects of some topics that you are going to be involved. So that's something. But if the person wants to be, there were several tries, zero outcome, zero, okay? Several of my friends ran for deputy. I voted for them, didn't work, unfortunately. And because it's different. To be in politics is not because you are a good advocate for science that you are going to be there and do what you want. That's my opinion. But I hope maybe you'll be able to do that.
All right, I want to thank you all for your questions, and I would like to invite Claudio Haddad to say a few words for us.
Okay, thank you, Marcia. It's a pleasure to be here. Second Haddad lecture. I'm very honored for this, for the thing that Harvard, puts together. Harvard has been a force for good and excellence in the world, and especially in Brazil too. Mainly through the, DRCLAS activities, which have been in various forms and helped in various areas. Harvard students that have come to Brazil, and many other things. So we are very happy to be able to support some of those activities and the fellowships that are granted here. I think they have a very strong impact in Brazil and on the students that come here, that certainly become better professionals and better citizens. And I like to thank, especially, I'm very grateful to Helena Nader, who have come here kindly and generously and has given us that excellent talk now. And thank you all, for coming, supporting us. Thank you, Marcia, again, and Harvard, to put this together. So I'm very happy to be here, and thank you all. Until next time.
So thank you, Claudio, for your generosity. Seriously, I mean, you make a huge difference for the Brazil Studies program. Thank you, Helena. This was absolutely brilliant. It's so good to hear about science, especially coming from you. And I want to thank Tiago, without whom I would never be able to do 10% of what we do in the Brazil Studies program. Thank you for organizing all of this. And thank you to Helena and all your team in Brazil, because the Brazil Studies program relies on the Brazil office. So thank you so much. And thank you to Saul and all the team at DRCLAS for keeping up with all the crazy ideas we have in the Brazil Studies program. So thank you all. We have some food and drinks outside, so let's mingle. Thanks again.
Muito obrigado.
Eu é que te agradeço.